That part is feeding, no? Crazy.
I would like first to thank all our health workers, doctors and researchers who are working around the clock to save lives. I would also like to offer words of support to those who are ill and are fighting the virus as we speak. This pandemic is putting our societies under serious strain. The well-being of each EU member state depends on the well-being of the whole of the EU. We are all in this together. Fighting Corona and its consequences will take time, but we have already made a lot of progress and taken bold action. Members of the European Council today held their fourth video conference to deal with the COVID-19 and its consequences. We have expressed a strong will to move forward together. We discussed progress on the various dimensions of the European response to the pandemic and welcomed the joint European roadmap towards lifting of COVID-19 containment measures. We all agreed that the health and safety of our citizens comes first. We also agreed to continue to follow the situation closely, in particular as we approach the holiday season, and to coordinate as much as possible to ensure a gradual and orderly lifting of restrictions. We welcomed the joint roadmap for recovery. It sets out some important principles such as solidarity, cohesion and convergence. It further defines 4 key areas for action: a fully functioning single market, an unprecedented investment effort, acting globally, and a functioning system of governance. It's of utmost importance to increase strategic autonomy of the Union and produce essential goods in Europe. Following the meeting of the Eurogroup in an inclusive format, we endorsed the agreement on 3 important safety nets for workers, businesses and sovereigns, amounting to a package worth 540 billion euros. We call for the package to be operational by 1st of June 2020. We also agreed to work towards establishing a recovery fund which is needed and urgent. This fund should be of a sufficient magnitude, targeted towards the sectors and geographical parts of Europe most affected, and be dedicated to dealing with this unprecedented crisis. We have therefore tasked the Commission to analyse the exact needs and to urgently come up with a proposal that's commensurate with the challenge we are facing. The Commission proposal should clarify the link with the MFF, which is any event will need to be adjusted to deal with the current crisis and its aftermath. The Eurogroup, in an inclusive format, will continue to closely monitor the economic situation and prepare the ground for a robust recovery. We remain committed to giving the necessary impetus to work on the recovery fund as well as the MFF, so that a balanced agreement on both can be found as soon as possible. We discussed also the situation regarding the drilling activities. And I would like to add that the illegal drilling activities by Turkey in Cyprus' exclusive economic zone were raised by some member states. We expressed our full solidarity with Cyprus and we called and reaffirmed our previous expressed conclusions on this matter. We agreed also that we will have a video conference the 6th of May with the Western Balkan countries. You know that the last months we have worked in order to adapt our strategy to take decisions regarding this region with the support of the Commission. And the 6th of May will be the occasion to have a video conference with those countries in order to express what are our priorities also for this region. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. I can seamlessly follow up on your words. The health situation is by far not fully under control, and many member states have not yet reached the peak. But at the same time, we already know that the scale, the speed, and the impact of the economic crisis is unprecedented in modern times. While the pandemic knows certainly no borders and is blind to nationalities, some countries are certainly hit harder than others, and unless we act decisively and collectively, the recovery will not be symmetric, and divergences between member states will increase. I'm therefore very happy that the leaders this evening tasked the Commission with shaping our collective response to the crisis. We will indeed carry out a thorough assessment of the impact of the crisis on the overall European economy, on our member states, but certainly also on some specific sectors. We know definitely that the GDP will fall everywhere, but it will fall more sharply in some member states than in others, and there will be more damage, certainly, to certain sectors, like, for example, tourism, than to others. We know also that the fiscal impact of the crisis differs significantly, as some member states are able to provide much more direct budgetary support to their economies than others. We have discussed one example, that is, for example, state aid. Up to today, state aid sums up to almost 1.8 trillion euros. But there are huge differences in how much state aid our member states are giving, and this is also linked to the financial space they have. This difference will have massive effects on the level playing field unless we counterbalance that. We have to design a common, future-proof answer to this to ensure the integrity and the cohesion of the single market and its shared prosperity. The response that we will have to give must be first repair crisis damage, and then generate recovery, build resilience, and guide our economies along the path of the green and the digital transitions in a fair manner. I am convinced that there is only one instrument that can deliver this magnitude of tasks behind the recovery, and that is the European budget, clearly linked to the Recovery Fund. The budget is time-tested. Everybody knows it. It is trusted by all member states, and it is per se designed for investment, for cohesion and convergence. And therefore, I am glad that the member states showed unity, impressive encouragement for the Commission to explore innovative financial instruments in relation to the MFF. The next MFF, the next 7-year MFF budget, has to adapt to the new circumstances post-corona crisis. We need to increase its firepower to be able to generate the necessary investment across the whole European Union. And therefore, we will propose to increase the so-called headroom, that is to say, the space between the existing ceiling in the MFF and the own resources ceiling. Thanks to the legal guarantee by member states, the Commission will be able to raise funds which will then be channeled through the European budget into the member states. Our current estimates of the needs lead us to think that an own resources ceiling of around 2% of GNI for 2 or 3 years instead of the current 1.2% will be required. The money raised, as I said, will be channeled back into the MFF through a recovery programme and concentrated into a number of programmes that will help tackle this crisis. And let me name 4 areas. I'm speaking of increased financial support for investment and reforms in member states and cohesion. That's where the bulk of the investment will go to. More investment, of course, in our modern policies. This is the European Green Deal and digital transition, and increased strategic autonomy. A smaller part will go into improving the resilience of our common crisis response tools. That is the lessons learned in this crisis. And of course, there has to be a pillar which is strengthening our support to our neighbourhood and partners. The investment should be front-loaded in the first years, and of course it is necessary to find the right balance between grants and loans. This whole endeavour is about protecting the integrity of our single market and of our union, and if we do it well and succeed, then the investments will have been worth every single cent we pay for them now. Thank you.
Thank you to both presidents for their introduction. I see a lot of you have already raised their blue hand. I'm going to take a couple of questions. Please state your name and your news outlet. We're going to start with Mark Peperkorn. Please, Mark, state your question.
Good evening. Good evening, Mark Peperkorn, Volkskrant, Netherlands.
We have a bad line, Mark. Could you speak up a bit?
To speak up a bit, absolutely. Is this better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question for both presidents. The first is for Mrs. von der Leyen. When you talk about increasing the ceiling from 1.2% to 2%, how much money could you raise with this? And the second question is for President Michel. Do you have the idea that you narrowed the differences of opinion this evening between the member states? Thanks.
So, of course, this has to be looked at thoroughly and is dependent of the overall result we will have. But we are not talking about billion. We are talking about trillion.
President.
No, thank you. I have really a positive assessment about this meeting tonight. It was really a promising European Council. Why? Because we agreed on a very clear framework. We are convinced that because this crisis is very huge, it's very important to take very strong decisions. And we have considered that it was important at the same time to work on the next MFF for the next 7 years and to use this very strong tool, which is also a tool for solidarity in Europe, but at the same time we have decided to work on the recovery fund, and it means that indeed about the modalities it will be very important to continue our efforts, and certainly based on the concrete proposals made by the Commission it will be possible with all the Member States to try to have a common approach and to take decisions together. But I'm really optimistic because even if it's difficult, even if of course there are different sensitivities in the European Council, it's not a surprise. I feel there is a very strong political will to work together and to succeed to build compromises.
Thank you very much. Passing on the line now to, to Beatriz Rios. Please, Beatriz, could you state your news outlet and put your question forward? Thank you.
Yes. I work for Euractiv, and my question is, when it comes to the differences between the member states regarding loans and grants, where do we stand? How many member states are more willing to use grants instead of loans, and how many are they willing to use loans? And then regarding the loans, if we're not talking about perpetual debt, what kind of maturity could we expect of long-term loans? Thank you.
Okay. As you can imagine, there is a variety of opinions about grants and loans and what kind of proportion that they should have. So there will certainly be a sound balance between grants and loans, and this is matter of to negotiation within the group with the member states so that we find a good mixture of loans and grants. There are pros and cons for both. You know the arguments, so these arguments have been exchanged tonight, but in a very constructive manner. I can only underline what the President of the Council has said. And the same goes for the maturity of the loans, of potential loans. So this all has to be negotiated in detail now and has to be discussed. For us, it was important that we are clear about the frame, and that we get a strong backing that we will work on this frame and fill it with life in close cooperation with the member states.
And I would like to add that the fact that tonight we have already discussed which part for loans, which part for grants, it shows that we are already discussing the first questions about the modalities, and it demonstrates that there is this very strong political will to work together in order to have an agreement on an MFF and on a recovery fund. We know that it will be difficult because these are difficult topics, difficult questions, but I repeat that we felt that the debate was very rational, which is very good, and we felt also that there was this very strong political will to try to work together and to take decisions together in the next weeks.
Yes, we're going to take the next question from David Carretta, Radio Radicale. David, are you there?
Yes, thank you. David Carretta, Radio Radicale. I have a question for President Michel. The Italian Prime Minister during the debate said that there is a political emergency or urgency right now. Do you see a political risk in this moment in the European Union and in particular in Italy? And the second question for President von der Leyen. The recovery fund will not start before, I guess, 2021. Do you foresee a bridge solution to allow member states to use that money before next year? Thank you.
It's totally right that there is a real sense of urgency, and it's important to work very hard and to take decisions. And if you look the last weeks, we have in 4 or 5 weeks, we have had 4 video conferences at the level of the head of state and the head of government. It shows that politically we are totally aware that it's important to work together and to take strong decisions. And if you look also in comparison with the past, at the European level, the financial crisis, for example, a few years ago, we can see that only in a few weeks we took very strong and impressive decisions. You have saw what has been decided by the Eurogroup. We have asked the Eurogroup to implement by the 1st of June the concrete decisions that we have already taken, and it's very important for the workers. It's also important for the businesses. It's also important in order to support the different member states, but it's not enough. And because it's not enough, we have worked with the President of the Commission in order to propose to the head of states and head of governments a framework, a very concrete framework, which is a roadmap in order to have a current approach and to take very strong decisions. And I repeat that the fact that we have already discussed at the level of the head of states this question of possible balance between grants, loans, and there are different opinions on that, it demonstrates that we are committed in order to take decisions as soon as possible. Even if we are not naive, we know that it will be necessary to continue all our political efforts. And regarding the situation in different member states, also in Italy, I think it will be important to demonstrate from the European perspective that this European project is very strong and that our common goal is more convergence, more cohesion and more solidarity. And we will act in order to make this demonstration.
So, addressing your question on the recovery program and from 21 on, together, which is topping the MFF, and the question of a bridging solution. Indeed, a few member states asked for some thoughts about a bridging solution, and the Commission is willing to look into that. We have been asked for it, and there are some ideas that might fit. For us, it's important that we should recall that right now, if you take all the measures of member states and the European institutions, 3.3 trillion have been put out now to stabilize our European economy. So we have time right now to work intensively on a new proposal for a new European budget topped by a recovery program. But of course, we are willing to look into bridging solutions.
Thank you, President von der Leyen. Next question goes to Maria Psara. Maria, are you there? Yes, you are.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Please put your question forward.
Maria Psara with Euronews, first of all, because you asked Karen. First of all, I didn't get it exactly. Which is the timeline in front of us? Is there any deadline? Do we have a time limit or something like that? And secondly, for President Ursula von der Leyen, you said that the Commission will work lively and closely with the states. If you could elaborate a little more of the way that the Commission will work to bring this proposal again to the leaders. Thank you.
The first question, or was I wrong?
I repeat that there is a real sense of urgency, and that's why our intention is to make some concrete proposals in the European Council, and for that we've asked the Commission to make some concrete proposals regarding the MFF, the recovery fund, and the link between both instruments. And I understand that it's the intention of the Commission to propose very quickly some concrete modalities, and based on that we will appreciate when it will be possible again to have a meeting at the level of the leaders.
Yes, and regarding your question, how to work together with the member states. This is a normal process. So before this council, of course, we have been in close contact and dialogue with all the member states and the president of the council, and we are elaborating about ideas and possibility. So therefore, and only therefore, it was possible today to have this strong support of the framework, of the idea, the plan to move forward. And this is exactly the same way we will be moving forward in the next days. So in close cooperation and dialogue with the member states to understand where their leeway and the limits are, what the different situation in these different member states are. Sometimes it's a different legal situation that is in different member states. So take all this in account. The positive part today in our council was that there was general openness to the fact that indeed we have to find a balance between grants and loans, but that it is a good idea to have the recovery program and the new MFF as one package and to work on that. And this constructive approach was encouraging.
Thank you, Maria. We're going for two more questions. Tobias Kaiser, are you there? Die Welt.
Yes, I'm there. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Two questions. One to Mrs. von der Leyen. Could you give us a bit more of a detailed time frame? What are you looking at as far as the next steps are concerned in this process? Particularly your idea of when we have a concrete proposal for a recovery fund. And the other question to Monsieur Michel, do you think the Council will agree on a recovery fund and an MFF at all during a video conference, or do you think it will really encounter a real person, a real life, to agree on these issues? Thank you very much.
So, yeah, what the time frame is concerned, of course, we work as fast as possible. And the goal is, because the MFF, the new MFF has to be a collegial process, the goal is to be in college either in the second or in the third week of May, depending on the progress we have, but as I said, in close dialogue with the member states, so that we have a very inclusive process to move forward.
As you know, we don't know when it will be possible again to have meetings in person at the level of the European Council, and that's why we are using the new technologies in order to make progress, and we will see when it will be possible to have again physical meetings, and based on that we will appreciate which outcome is realistic without a physical meeting, and in case of necessity we will appreciate which kind of decisions we take on that.
I'm going to take one more question from Sam Fleming from the Financial Times. Sam, there you are.
Hi, thanks very much indeed for taking the question. I had one follow-up from Mark Peppercorn's question on the own resources ceiling to President von der Leyen. Could you give us a sense, in terms of the increase to 2%, how much extra debt issuance does that allow for the Commission, rather than the overall size of the recovery fund? And we've seen figures around 300 billion over 2 or 3 years. Does that sound about right, based on the 2% figure? And the question for President Michel, obviously you proposed a compromise back in February of around, in terms of the size of the MFF, around 1.06 to 1.07% of GNI. Do you see any convergence now, given the urgency of the crisis here, towards the compromise level around there? Or do you think the divisions are just as wide as ever when it comes to the size of the MFF? Thank you.
So I hope you understand that I will not elaborate about concrete figures tonight, but the process I was just explaining is so that we have to show and want to show respect to the member states, so that we talk, first of all, with them about what the balance could be. As you rightly pointed out, the own resources ceiling is at a certain proposed level. We were talking about around 2%, but of course the question is, how big is the MFF? That is part of the overall picture too. So this has to be discussed. There are a lot of topics stemming from this relation, MFF to own resources ceiling, also towards the question grants versus loans. And this has to be discussed, and today is too early to go in details in that.
No, we understand that the GDP will be affected by the consequences of this crisis, and about the numbers, it will be essential to continue our political dialogue in order to try to reach some compromises also about the numbers.
Thank you to you all for your questions, and thank you for participating and joining up, and see you next time around for the next video conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Merci.